there are so many people, Black and brown people, who have been disenfranchised, locked up, deported, other, whatever, because of weed. Even though to this day, we have people who are still getting locked up for weed, who are still feeling the impacts of the war on drugs. Welcome to High on Self-Care. I'm your host, Stacey Zeal, yoga teacher, crystal lover, high-functioning stoner, and CEO of MaryZeal.com, a community for stoners who love cannabis and are looking to prioritize their self-care. On this podcast, we'll explore ways that meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and of course, all things weed can help you to elevate your self-care. We'll explore ways to truly value ourselves, use stillness for self-discovery, and cannabis to go higher on our journey. Think of me as your sister stoner who lovingly encourages you to prioritize yourself and reap the benefits of this magical plant. If you're ready to create a life that holds space for your most valuable asset, that's you, by the way, take a deep breath, light your J, and let's dive in. Hey peeps, welcome to High on Self-Care. My name is Stacey Zeal, and as always, I'm super excited you are here because we have another awesome, great episode for you today. And if you are new, welcome. My name again is Stacey Zeal. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a high-functioning stoner, and I'm the CEO of MaryZeal.com, which is a community empowering women of color to use cannabis and self-care to live their best abundant lives. And so I prefer all my self-care to be infused with weed. So on the site, you'll find tons of great information about how to do that and how to use cannabis intentionally to take your self-care to the next level. So make sure that you all subscribe to this podcast because you don't want to miss any new episodes. We have such awesome content, so make sure you subscribe. Also, leave us a review. If you've liked the podcast, if you've listened before, please leave us a review because that helps us to spread the message. It helps the podcast guys to show more people our podcast and to get them into our space and to our community. And the world could benefit from more weed smokers, I personally think. So please leave a review. And I just love to know what you think. I want to make sure that this podcast is filling your soul or feeding you in some kind of way. And that's my goal. So leave me a review. Let me know what you think. And on the site, for those of you who are new to the site, who haven't been to the site, I have some awesome, great content there. So there is my ultimate guide for stoners, how to have a productive morning. So if you're someone who struggles with getting up in the morning and having a productive day, I used to be there, trust me, so get it. So I've put together this handy guide for you to go through to learn everything from how to get great sleep at night with cannabis, all the way to how to create a morning routine and how to pick strains that will be best for morning activities or whatever. So definitely go check that out. It's on the site, MaryZeal.com/goodmorning. The link is also in the show notes below. And if you want to get this podcast emailed to you every Thursday, head over to MaryZeal.com/podcast. Drop your email in there and join the podcast tribe because this goes out to my email list. I love my email list. They get all the goodies before everybody else gets it anywhere else. So make sure you hop on my email list. And again, June is all about energy. So if this is your first podcast, listen to High on Self-Care. Again, welcome. This month of June, this is Pride Month. This is an awesome month. So we're talking about energy, okay? So the last two podcasts, you have one about how to protect your energy. Last week's podcast was how to create a squad that energizes you, how to have, create some friends and have people around you who can really just kind of gas you up. And so having a squad of people, again, is just super important. That episode, I loved recording that episode for sure. So make sure you go back and listen to that. So having a squad of people is super important around you with this topic that we're talking about today, right? So we're talking about cannabis, business. And the reason I wanted to do this is because this week, if you didn't know, Juneteenth is this week. It's on June 19th. It is a celebration in the African American community of when the last enslaved Black Americans were informed that slavery had ended, right? So my Emancipation Proclamation came out on January 1st, 1863. Took about 2 years for the last enslaved Americans in the place in Texas to actually be informed that they were free. So this is what we celebrate this week, June 19th. And so I wanted to take this week to kind of step back from self-care a little bit and talk about cannabis business, give you some resources on how you can get into the business, talk a little bit about cannabis as a business, talk about a little bit of the history for context, some stats, the war on drugs, all kinds of stuff. I'm gonna dive into all of these different things because I think you need to understand the full scope of cannabis, right? So we have talked a lot on this podcast just about how cannabis is such a great plant for self-care, how to use it with, meditations and yoga and journaling, and really use it for self-discovery. And that is, my goal, right? My overall goal is to empower more people to step into the cannabis space as a consumer. But I also recognize that there is this business side of cannabis. And so in honor of Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is a celebration, I wanted to take this time this week to talk to you about how you can get into the cannabis industry, or how, what it looks like, whether, a lot of different things that, go into being in the cannabis business. And really, like, the goal is for you to walk away feeling empowered to step into this space. Know that there is a place for you in this space. If you are someone who identifies as Black or a minority, there is space for you here, right? I'm in it. So I want to give you, some of the things that I've used to help me to be in the cannabis industry. And so hopefully, we'll get to a place, honestly, where we're one day celebrating no more Black people getting locked up or deported or otherwise disenfranchised by weed, like we are with Juneteenth, celebrating the ending of the official, when the last slaves were informed that slavery had ended and they were free. Okay. And so that's the goal, right? One of the goal really of cannabis legalization and all the work that we're doing and other people are doing. And I have a bunch of resources and organizations that you can reach out to if you want to help and use your voice to stop the disenfranchisement of, Black people and brown people for cannabis. There are so many people, Black and brown people, who have been disenfranchised, locked up, deported, whatever, because of weed. Even though to this day, we have people who are still getting locked up for weed, who are still feeling the impacts of the war on drugs. And even though we're in legalization mode, right? We have so many states legalizing, we have so many, places expanding their definition of legalization for cannabis, right? But we still have people who are disenfranchised by this plant. So I wanted to take this time to really, give you a little stats, give you a little information, talk about it. And then I want to wrap up by giving you some information and some resources that really helped me to get into the space, because I do honestly feel like, in order for us to overcome this war on drugs, and to get past it, we need to get more Black and brown people into the cannabis space. We need to start making money from the cannabis space. There's so much money in this, and there's so much, empowerment, and there's so many resources that we can use. So I wanted to kind of take this time to bring all that together, and have one space where you can kind of go to and just really figure out what you can do to get into the space, and some resources that I've used personally to help me get into the space. So let's be clear. Let's start off with let's be clear. Cannabis prohibition was because of racism. The war on drugs, all of that, because of racism. The goal was to lock up and disenfranchise Black people. And so I have some stats that I pulled from the Center for American Progress. 1, Black Americans are 4 times more likely than white people to be arrested for cannabis, even though we only account for, about less than 13% of the population. And statistically, races use drugs at the same rate, right? 4 times more likely. 80% of people serving time for federal drug offenses are Black or Latino. 60% at the state level. That's a hell of a number, right? That's a big ass number. Okay. And, it's crazy, right? So, and I pulled another stat. In 2015, the federal government spent an estimated $9.2 million a day to incarcerate individuals for drug-related offenses. Now, imagine if that money had been used to stop poverty, to treat people who use illicit drugs, not cannabis, people who to help addicts and people who need help, or even to make medical cannabis available for free to vets, cancer patients, people who will help, right? Imagine how much, $9.2 million a day just to lock people up for drug-related offenses. That is insane, right? And so, and then I found another stat that was just, the flip side of that is just crazy, right? So it was cannabis legalization would save roughly $7.7 billion a year in enforcement costs. And create about $6 billion in tax revenue. That's about $13.7 billion of savings and revenue from cannabis legalization, right? So it's insane. We're spending $9.2 million a day to keep people locked up for drug-related offenses. And cannabis legalization on the flip side of that would create about $13.7 billion. Imagine what we could do with that type of money, and how we can invest in our communities, how we can, make sure that business owners are getting black and brown business owners are getting loans, because we're seeing that we got left out of, we got so far left out of the stimulus packages and stuff like that for businesses. It's insane, right? It's insane, the amount of money. So I honestly believe, like I mentioned a little bit ago, I believe one of the best ways to combat the impact of cannabis prohibition on our communities is by creating a seat at our own table. And I say a seat at our own table, right? I don't think we need to create a seat at their table, right? I think that we need to create our own table, as we have. There are so many Black owners in the cannabis space, right? So many Black people I've come across in this space. And so this place, this was built on, this industry was built on our backs. And so in order for us to really get to a place where we can, have equity, and we can, have a say in this industry, we need to have more Black and brown people in the industry. And so that's the goal of this this podcast today, is to really just kind of give you some resources, some information, some, some empowerment, some inspiration for those of you who are considering getting into this space. And then whether that's getting into the space as a business owner or getting into a space as, as a employee, because there are tons of marketing people and warehouse people and managers and all kinds of stuff needed in the cannabis space. And I saw a stat that cannabis salaries, people who are in the cannabis space, tend to make about 10% more than other industries. So whether you want to come into it as a business owner or not, there's definitely space for you. And so I found a stat, 80% of cannabis owners are white, mostly white men. Shocker, right? Not surprising. We are not surprised that this industry is mainly dominated by white people. And I saw that of that 20% that is not owned by white people, only 4.3% is Black owned. So yeah, there is space for us here, right? Or we can create space, as I should say. We're going to create, we have tables, and we just need to get ourselves to those tables and build them up and make them bigger and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And so legal cannabis sales are projected to reach 22 billion by 2022. That's next year, y'all. Okay. That is next year. $22 billion, right? So imagine the kind of impact we would have if those dollars were within our community, right? If we as cannabis business owners got to decide where our funds are spent and how we're marketed to, right? Or how we're positioned, because we've seen all of the, cheesy, crazy marketing that shows cannabis users as lazy, stone, we Black people move culture, right? We have such an impact on culture, cannabis culture, cultures outside of this. So, there is space for us in here outside of just, the monetary, the money that's going to bring in, right? There's space for us here to create and to be seen and to be heard. And I parallel this to the tech industry. So outside of cannabis, the podcast, my day job, my full-time job is working in tech. I'm in the marketing department for a tech company. And when I wanted to get in tech, I remember avoiding tech a little bit, because I just was like, okay, it's such a, white space. Are there Black people here? Or is there space for me? Am I welcome in this space? These are the types of things that Black people think about, at least I speak for myself. I think about when approaching a new industry, predominantly white industry. And so essentially, when I wanted to get into tech, I went searching for the Black people. I said, okay, I want to get into tech. Once I made that decision, I was just like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Actually, that was the first time I actually sat with myself and said, Stacey, what do you want to do? And if you listen to some previous episodes of the podcast, definitely go back and listen to some. I share more about my story and getting into tech and, all that kind of stuff. So check out the episode on fear, because that's really kind of where I go into it. But I parallel that. So like I said, I parallel this to the tech industry. And so I went searching for the Black folks. I went searching specifically for the Black women. So I found some amazing, amazing communities. of Black women in tech. Mostly I search for them on Facebook groups. If you're looking to get into tech and you're looking, send me a DM or something, and I will absolutely point you to some great resources that I've come across with Black people and Black women in particular in the tech industry. And so naturally, when I got into the cannabis space, I said, well, all right, let me find the Black people. So I went searching for the Black folks. I went searching for the Black women, and I've come across so many awesome, amazing Black women, Black people in the tech industry. And in the cannabis industry, in the cannabis space. And so there is definitely space. There is community here. There are people who are willing to help. There's so many resources that are out there specifically for minorities who are looking to get into the cannabis space. So really the message here is that there is space. Although the industry is mostly white, we have so many options for getting into the space. And not to say that we are without challenges, right? There are tons of challenges for minorities to get into this space. I'm not going to say that it's an easy space to get into. But again, I have some resources coming up in a little bit that will help. So when thinking about the cannabis space, one of the things you start to think about is kind of like two-ish categories. On a high level, what you can think about are plant-touching businesses and not plant-touching businesses. And they're sound exactly like the name. Plant-touching is something where you're touching the plant. So you're growing it, you're processing, you're making products, you're distributing it like as a dispensary, whatever, right? Then you have not plant-touching. So things like creating systems and tech and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And so and Mary Zeal is an example of a not plant touching company, right? So I don't actually touch the plant, but I have a lot of resources on how to use it and that type of thing. So that's really the approach I took. And it's so interesting because originally when I decided, okay, I want to get into the cannabis space, I really kind of I meditated on it. I sat with it. Obviously I smoked before I meditated on it, but I had been a cannabis user for a few years before I even, got into the space. It wasn't even something that was really on my roadmap. But when I sat with myself and started to figure out what I want my life to look like, what I want to do, what do I like, cannabis came up. And it stuck with me, and it's something that I love talking about. And so originally, when I started Mary Zeal was going to be a cannabis farm. And so I was like, okay, I want to grow weed because I'm really into gardening. I love growing stuff. That's something I love to do. And then I had the idea I want to start blogging about what I'm doing. I want to start, so I was reading about growing weed, even tried to grow my own weed. I grew it, I smoked it. It was cool. It was exciting for sure. And so I decided okay, I want to start blogging about this. And then I realized this is so much, I love blogging about it. And right now this is really kind of taking off. This is what I want to do, spread education, and people love it. And so I said, okay, well, I didn't want to do both, right? I can't, like I said, I work full time. I can't do both. And so I decided to focus on the blog to the not plant touching space because that definitely was one easier to balance, but it was very interesting. It's so many, when I started to see the amount of people in the space, spreading education and things like that, I thought okay, there's really a place in the market for me to come in to specifically speak to Black women or women of color to create a community more so than a space to come and learn about the difference between CBD and THC and, cannabinoids and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff is on the site. If you go to maryzeal.com/free, you'll see my Beginner to Bud Boss guide, which goes over cannabis science, how it interacts with your system, difference between CBD, THC, all that kind of stuff, right? So that is there. But really, there's a larger conversation that I've wanted to have, that I am having, right? It's about how to use cannabis as self-care. And so the goal of Mary Zeal is to create a safe space for women of color to openly enjoy, learn about, and build community around cannabis as self-care. And so that's the route that I decided to go. And my cannabis farm is still definitely on my bucket list. It's definitely something I see myself as building a part of my business as Mary Zeal grows from just a podcast and a blog and a course and stuff like that. As I see my business growing, having a cannabis farm or, something, as I see myself going full-blown hippie, probably by the time I turn 40. And so when I go full-blown hippie mode, for me, that is me living and having my farm, having my retreats and stuff on the farm and that type of thing. So that's just more to come. Not, but anyway, it's not the point of this. But so, so that's the thing. And so you can use the skills that you already have to come into the space, whether you want to be plant touching, whether you not want to be plant, whether you want to be not plant touching. And this was an awesome book that I came across when I first started trying to figure out, how do I get into the cannabis industry? And so it's a book called How to Succeed in the Cannabis Industry by Dashida Dawson, by a Black woman. It's a great book because she literally talks you through plant touching, not plant touching. She talks you through strategy and marketing and resources. So that is an awesome book. And if you go to the show notes, head on over to maryzeal.com/23. You'll get the show notes, and I will link to the book there because it's an awesome book. Again, it's called How to Succeed in the Cannabis Industry by Dashida Dawson. And so there is space. So that's really, what I want you to take away is that there is space for you here, even though it doesn't look like it. We just have to find each other. And that's kind of that's a goal for Mary Zeal I want to have more Black cannabis owners on the show. Cannabis business owners on the show to kind of, give you a perspective that is really interesting. So if that's something that you think would be interesting, send me a DM on Instagram, follow me. Check the link is in the show notes if you want to follow me on Instagram, or, send me a DM or something. And I will have some more cannabis owners on the podcast for sure. So now that we have walked through some stats, we've talked about the war on drugs, we've talked about the cannabis industry, we've talked about Black people in the cannabis industry, and we talked about safe spaces for Black people in the cannabis industry and how to create your own or how to join. And so now I want to give you some more resources for Black folks to get into the cannabis industry, specifically if you want to get into it business-wise or career-wise. And so these are some great organizations that I've come across. The first one is Supernova Women. It's formed by women of color with the goal of empowering people to become self-sufficient shareholders in the evolving cannabis economy. So that's a great one, Supernova Women. Another one, Minority Cannabis Business Association. Definitely check them out. There's another association, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And Cannaclusive. I love Cannaclusive. I follow them on Instagram. They're always providing great information, and they have this accountability list, which is awesome, that cannabis brands have signed on to commit to being more inclusive within their space. So if you're looking for a job or some people to kind of partner with, definitely check out Cannaclusive's website. They have, like I said, it's called the accountability list. So it's great. Definitely check that out. And the last resource I have is called the Cannalution app. And this is an app that's actually not out yet, but I'm excited for this app, and I would love to have the founder come on the show. She's a Black woman. I follow her on Twitter, and it's called Cannalution app, and it's coming out with a mission to support Black and brown entrepreneurs getting into the cannabis space. So from what I see, she's planning on having education and all kinds of different, events and stuff like that. So really head on over to that site. And again, all of these organizations will be linked in the show notes, maryzeal.com/23. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you found some of the statistics that we talked about eye-opening. I hope that you have felt that you're walking away feeling like there is space for you in this industry, whether you want to be in it as a business owner, employee. And I hope that you have a great Juneteenth. This is a time for celebration. And so I wanted to make sure that this episode just leaned into that celebration, right? Because, I hope, like I said, I hope one day we are celebrating no more Black and brown people being locked up or deported or otherwise disenfranchised by using weed. Right? So I hope that we get to that place. And until then, I think that one of the things we can do as Black folks is to, if you're interested in the cannabis industry, is jump in, figure out a way for you to use your skills or your interests to get into this space, because there is space for you here. There are people who are trying to create safe spaces, who are trying to get us all this information. So I really hope that this episode has just kind of been a funnel from, my experiences and my thoughts and my processes, and my thoughts and processes, and then funneling some information to you to then take that and go and make your big, beautiful dreams come true. So again, leave a review. Let me know what you think. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and head over to maryzeal.com to get all the amazing, good, awesome information about cannabis as self-care and how you can actually use it to live your best, beautiful, abundant life. So Happy Juneteenth. Hope you have an awesome celebration this week. And I'll catch you on the next episode. OMG, I could talk about that all day, sis. Want to get more insights like this to your inbox every week? Say less. Just head over to maryzeal.com/subscribe to join our newsletter.